Have you ever looked at a crochet pattern and wondered, can I even do that? I would say one of the skills that's most challenging for beginners especially is picking out a project that you're gonna love, going to be able to finish, and is within your skill range. So I'm super excited to start some pattern reviews. I'm gonna be very honest with you here. It does me no good to lie to you about these patterns. I am paying for these patterns myself and making them myself. And then I'm just gonna share with you what my experience is and how I, as an experienced crochet designer and teacher, feel about the pattern and my insight into whether you might want to make it or not. Hello, and welcome to Bla Bla Black Sheep, a weekly yarny podcast where I, Sarah Korth of SEK Handmade, talk all things yarny, and today we're doing a pattern review. Today, the pattern I'm going to be reviewing is the Egg Sheep. I'll be honest with you, when I saw that name, I was like, huh? But also, could you even resist this adorable little sheep? I definitely couldn't. I'll be really honest with you, when I first started this pattern, I was a little worried that it was going to end up like one of those Pinterest fails. You know, where they show the picture of what the cake is supposed to be like, and then they show like a mushy disaster of what it actually looked like when somebody normal made it. Yeah, I thought it was gonna be one of those. I am not a person who makes amigurumi. I never have been. I've never had a big interest in it, but I have to tell you, a lot of the students who come to me are very interested in making amigurumi. And one of their biggest complaints is that Woobles lied to them. They picked out a Woobles pattern under the impression that it was very beginner friendly and that they could pick it up with little or no crochet knowledge and be zooming along right away, and most of them find that not to be the case. So I wanted a really doable pattern that I could teach my students. And the sheep egg, I just fell in love with him, and you're gonna see in a minute. I've made several. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through all the things real quickly that you need for the pattern and what I used for the pattern, and then I'm gonna give you my overall impressions, what skills I think you need, and who I think this pattern is right for. So let's start by talking yarn. I did not use the yarn that was called for in the pattern. The pattern called for Caron Simply Soft, which is an Aran weight yarn. It's 315 yards per 170 grams. That's a very easy to find big box store yarn. I can see why the designer chose this. I think it's a great choice for this, but I wanted to use something that was sold in my local yarn shop so that people could support my local yarn shop and participate in my class. So I reached out to the wonderful and marvelous Blue Sky Fibers, and they sent me some of their yarn to make my little sheep out of, and oh my gosh, it turned out amazingly well. I used wool stock, the worsted variety from Blue Sky Fibers. It is a worsted weight yarn, and it is 123 yards per 50 grams. So Ravelry.com calls the Caron Simply Soft an Aran weight and calls the wool stock a worsted weight. If you were looking for yarns, that might be your first clue that these are not exactly the same. I've taken their very different ratios and turned them both into how many yards per 100 grams. And I think that's going to be a really great clue onto how different a weight yarns these are. So when converted to 100 grams, Caron Simply Soft has 186 yards per 100 grams, 186. Blue Sky Fibers wool stock worsted has 246 yards per 100 grams. What that means is that the wool stock is a much lighter yarn than the Caron Simply Soft. The way that I remedied this is that I held my yarn double, and that actually turned out to be a really great solution. My sheep actually turned out to be almost exactly the same size as the pattern. It was a nice thick fabric, so I didn't have any stuffing poking out anywhere. And I mean, my sheeps are just adorable. For the hook, it calls for a very small hook in comparison to the yarn weight, and that is because you want nice, tight, dense stitches so that your safety eyes don't fall out and so that your stuffing doesn't come poking through any holes. So for this pattern, you'll need, and I used, a US E, which is a 3.5 millimeter hook. Other supplies that you'll need are safety eyes or some sort of eye, whether you choose to do felt. If you're giving it to a little person, we don't want those hard eyes. I use safety eyes on mine because my littlest is 10 and he's not going to eat eyes. You need a tapestry needle, you need embroidery thread and an embroidery needle. That's for sewing on the cute little face pieces. You could also make eyes out of embroidery thread too. You need stuffing, and then you can also use a marker or paint or blush to create little rosy cheeks and put little pink in their ears. So let's talk skill level. I think this is a great project for an adventurous beginner. Jen, the designer, has written this pattern incredibly well. She's been very thoughtful about what tips and tricks people might need who don't normally do amigurumi. You only need a couple stitches to make this pattern happen. If you can single crochet, chain, and slip stitch comfortably, you could definitely tackle this pattern. I do think that it's important that you can read your stitches well. I started teaching this class already, and the biggest problem that people had and needed help with was reading their stitches. Do I have the right number of stitches? Have I put them in the right order? There is increasing and decreasing in this pattern, of course, to shape the sheep and all his little ears and tail and whatnot. So being able to count your stitches and see how many stitches you've placed in each stitch and your increases and decreases is a skill that you're definitely going to want to have if you're doing this by yourself. Of course, if you're taking a class with a teacher, that's what we're here for, to help you out. The other skill that you really need to work this or any other amigurumi pattern is you need to be able to create tight stitches. Typically for beginners, that is not a problem because beginners tend to stitch tight anyways. This, of course, can also be created by going down hook sizes. You're already starting with a pretty small hook size, though there is smaller that you can go. So you could go down a hook size or two if you need your stitches to be tighter. Other quick tip about how to tighten your tension is to wrap your yarn around your fingers more. So if you wrap around your pinky and your pointer finger like I do, you could wrap twice around your pinky or wrap a couple times around your pointer finger or wrap it around your pointer finger, weave it back and forth between your other fingers, wrap it a couple times. All of those things create more drag on the yarn, which will allow you to have a tighter tension. All right, let's talk some modifications and tips. I changed very, very little about this pattern. Partly because I was teaching a class on it and I didn't want to go too crazy, but partly because it is just such a great pattern. This is my first little sheep that I made. This is, I think my first full amigurumi I've ever made. Look at how cute he turned out. He is just perfect. Jen does a really great job of explaining the eye placement, the ear placement, the little tail. Oh, it's so cute. And so for this first one, I did everything exactly as she recommended. Now, partly because he's so stinking adorable, and partly because my little one is just as obsessed as I am, I've already started 2 more sheep. And with my second sheep, I decided I wanted his face placement to be a little different. And you can see his eyes are closer together and his nose is a little closer together too. So that's something that's easy to play with, and Jen tells you to put the face on at just the right point so that you can really adjust its placement. This guy was first, this guy was second. I started making a third one and my little was like, I like the eyes of this guy and the mouth of this guy. So here's my third one. With the closer together eyes, but the wider nose and mouth. Honestly, I have plans to make one more because I want to see a sheep with a really dark body and light colored fur. This guy is going to have dark brown fur and this guy is going to have dark gray fur. Fur, wool, it's not really fur. Just some little tiny tips that I learned from making this guy. You add all of his wool at the end, so like this guy, I had sewn his ears and everything on, and I had a hard time kind of getting around these front pieces, so I didn't. And then when I got to the end, I was like, oh, I wish he had a little fur or wool in front of his ears. So what I did was I took a loop of the wool that was down below and a loop of the wool that was up above and some of this color yarn, and I just looped through both of them to pull them kind of down in front of his ears, and I really like how that turned out. My second tip is to leave him naked on the bottom. This really allows him to flatten out a little bit on the bottom. You can see with this guy, he literally is an egg shape, hence the name of the pattern. And so this guy has a tendency to roll over instead of sit really nicely. See, this guy can move around. He sits nicely. This guy, he's gone. Let's talk my overall impressions of the pattern. First of all, can you tell I love it so much? He turned out just as adorable as any of the pictures that Jen has in her pattern. I think it is definitely possible for your non-amigurumi person to make this and end up with a super cute sheep. The pattern is written really clearly. Jen has very thoughtfully designed this pattern to be beginner friendly and to include all the little tips and tricks and instructions that you might need throughout if you're not an experienced amigurumi maker. One of the things that makes this such a great pattern for beginners though is this wool fluff. It covers up a multitude of sins. You can see by comparison from the naked guy to the fully fluffed guy, it really covers up any stitch mistakes you've made in there. And also, sewing, I think, is one of the hardest things for amigurumi. If you look closely, I'm not a great seamstress when it comes to sewing little things on, and adding the wool fluff around all of those pieces makes all of that little less than perfect pieces disappear under the super cute fluff. Also, this pattern is written in all standard crochet terms and formatting. With the advent of self-publishing, designers aren't always held to a certain standard, and not all designers hold themselves to that standard, but Jen has taken the time to apply very standard pattern writing techniques to this, making it really easy to follow for those who know how to read patterns. Let's talk about who this pattern is not for. My disclaimer with this is, if you are up for the challenge and you are really enthused to make this pattern, there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't start even from complete scratch and within a little bit of time with some practice, be ready to make this sheep. However, if you are a very beginner, and you cannot read your stitches well, and you haven't mastered tensioning your yarn, this pattern is not for you. You definitely need to be able to maintain an even and nice tight tension to have all of his little pieces come out looking correct and even. So if you haven't mastered those techniques, keep practicing, and then this would be a great first amigurumi project for you. I have links to this wonderful pattern as well as the yarn I used. Go straight to the show notes, click more, find everything you need. Also, quick plug, if you liked this content, I would love it if you would like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We meet here every week, and I'd love for you to join us every week. All right, let's talk real quick about what I'm wearing. I'm wearing my Lumi cowl, which has this gorgeous wavy lace pattern. It's very repetitive, super easy to do. I made mine with Nanette Wake Studio yarns, holding 2 strands of fingering weight together, but you could also make it with 1 strand of DK weight. I'm also wearing these giant, fun, and lightweight earrings. These are by Bla, handmade. I have several pairs of their earrings, and I wear them all the time. They're so fun and so lightweight. Okay, I have a little unboxing that I want to share with you. The Instagrams got me again. I was just scrolling through Instagram and I saw yarn from a Nanette Wake Studio who I love, and oh my goodness, it was so gorgeous. I couldn't resist. So I've cut the top of my package open because it always makes me nervous to cut open packages of yarn because I don't want to cut the yarn, but they're all wrapped up inside. So let's take a look. Let's start with this guy. Ooh, okay. So I got 2 colorways. This is Noir, which is a deep black. Really beautiful, because I wanted a neutral to go with this really fun bold color I got. So this must be the bold color. Oh, I got 3 skeins. So this is the bold color too. It's just so pretty. Okay, so it's this really gorgeous pinky purple. And you can see, especially if you look at this one, do you see the variations in it? It's not just a solid purple. It's got really gorgeous nuance to it. It's so pretty. Like, look at that little deeper spots. Oh, so beautiful. So this is heliotrope. It's a DK weight yarn, and it's a 21 micron merino wool, 50% merino, 50% baby alpaca. So this is going to be, look at it, super drapey, super drapey. It's really soft. And I think I'm going to make a shawl out of it. So this is plenty of yarn to make a shawl. And so I can't wait. I actually purchased this yarn, and then the very next day she had a sale. And at first I was like, oh, but then I was like, you know what? I don't even care. A, because I know her yarn and she dyes really stunning yarn. It's totally worth it. And because she has some of the lowest hand dyed yarn prices on the market. Those skeins of 50% like super high quality merino and baby alpaca are only $26.50 a skein. Which I know, if you're used to buying big box yarn, that's a lot. But if you're used to buying hand-dyed yarn, that is an incredibly reasonable price. All right, a couple quick announcements. Who Gives a Scrap is wrapping up. I cannot believe it is almost March. I should be able to because February is a short month, but it still blows my mind. Next month is all about celebration. It is the 2-year birthday of Bla Bla Black Sheep podcast and the 100th episode. I'm super excited to be celebrating both of those. So as I said before, I would love it if you would like, subscribe, turn on notifications, maybe share this with a friend who might enjoy being a part of this community too. I would love to know your thoughts on amigurumi. Do you make amigurumi? Do you have patterns that you love? Are there tips that you would want to give? Lay it all out there. Thank you so much for joining me this week. We'll be back next week with another Blah Blah Black Sheep episode. Have an amazing week and happy crafting.